Daniel Pinchbeck.
Day two.
Welcome to Germany.
Thanks very much.
You are here to support the premiere of your movie 2012 Time for Change.
That's what got me over here.
What does 2012 mean for you in these days?
2012. Yes, well, according to the classical Mayan civilization of the Yucatan, it was December 21st, 2012 was the end of a 5,125-year long count, which began around 3,100 BC. And it's something that we've only learned about. You know, archaeologists have sort of unearthed elements of their culture over the last 50 years. And it seems that they saw these cyclical endings as times of kind of regeneration, you know, destruction and then new creation. So, you know, there are all sorts of ways to look at this. You know, a lot of people would just dismiss the knowledge of indigenous cultures and say that, you know, it's folktale or fantasy. But, you know, I've given it a much deeper kind of analysis in my work, in my book 2012, The Return of Quetzalcoatl, and then in the film. And I think it's extraordinary that their prophecies correlate with a time of such intense transformation, catastrophe, and technological innovation that we're now living through. So, yeah, I mean, hopefully, I mean, I don't necessarily think that anything particularly devastating is going to happen on that date or on that year, but hopefully there's a process of awakening happening, and the opportunity for humanity to kind of graduate into a more mature and responsible phase of its development, and also a kind of reintegration of mysticism, of the spirituality knowledge that's carried by you know, many cultures, including the indigenous cultures, that we can then kind of reintegrate with our technology, our technical mindset, to really construct a more awesome and amazing civilization going forward.
I mean, there's no question that we live in a time of change. Everybody knows this. And at the latest, due to the so-called financial crisis, and if I might add the nuclear catastrophe in Japan, these are incredible events, and everybody here knows that life cannot go on like this. But what kind of ability did the Mayas have to project this over 5,000 years? How did they live, and what did they have which we don't have anymore?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, like many indigenous cultures, they had a kind of deep sensitivity to natural and cosmic cycles. And in a sense, they were the most developed form that a culture based on shamanic experience, shamanic knowledge reached. They became very sophisticated artists, archaeologists, astronomers. They charted the movements of the planet, the sunspot cycles, movement of Venus, and so on. And they somehow correlated their observations with what they discovered through their visionary experiences, through ritual, through shamanism, using tools like mushrooms and peyote and so on. So it's very hard for us to get back into that mindset. You know, my work has been inspired to a large extent by some previous thinkers and visionaries who use those same techniques of shamanic consciousness to rediscover aspects of Mayan cosmology and thought. This is especially people like Terence McKenna and Jose Arguelles, who just died about a month ago.
So one could say they had been in touch with nature, with the universe, with the cosmos, and we lost this ability. How did this happen? How could we end up in a society and at a time where only rational analysis and logical thinking is dominating whatever we do in the society?
Yeah.
What has happened?
Well, I mean, I try to step back and look at everything as an evolutionary process. And in a sense, it may be that in order to have gained some capacity, some new abilities, we temporarily had to forfeit or give up some of the ones that we previously possessed. So if you look at the history of modern Western civilization, in a sense we became kind of obsessed, or you could almost say possessed, by a space and matter in a way that other cultures weren't. And we really wanted to understand the nature of physical reality, the nature of matter. We kind of stepped into space, through the discovery of perspective and the Renaissance. We really began to only believe that things that could be quantified, that could be rationally analyzed and understood, that only those things had value. And things that were more intangible or intuitive, or in a sense feminine, were considered of no value. And so this led to, for instance, the Inquisition, where throughout Europe, those people who were holding the kind of ancient plant wisdom, of the European world, were sought out and burnt at the stake, and that whole knowledge system was annihilated as much as possible. So we went through this process, and now in the 20th century, we began to re-access non-ordinary states of consciousness, mysticism, shamanism, and I think you could see over the last 100 years, the last 50 years, a deepening shift in the Western psyche, which includes the integration of Eastern thought, Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, Hinduism, yoga, Vedanta, and then also the opening of consciousness through psychedelic experience, through shamanism. That clearly was a major influence in the social and cultural revolution of the 1960s, which in a way could be seen as part of a initiatory process for the modern consciousness, and maybe one that we're destined to see deepen or maybe even complete itself in our time.
Okay, thank you. It is obvious that almost all major fields of our society, such as energy, such as finance, such as food and water, such as the media industry, the way we people got to know what's going on in the world, that all those fields are almost at the edge. It feels that they cannot continue the way they have been doing it so far. For example, if we start looking at the field of energy, at the latest, the catastrophe in Japan has at least forced the German government to change their view and to change their consciousness, how they look at nuclear energy overnight. So they want to get out of this. How do you see, what are the chances for mankind to change directions in the field of energy?
It's a deep question. We explored a little bit in our film, and actually we were going to get deeper into the whole subject of the possibility of what's called free energy, or the idea that it's possible that we could draw energy from the quantum fluctuations of the vacuum or from the fields, which I think might be a legitimate possibility. But it seems that somehow our capacity to access maybe a less destructive form of energy would also be connected to a transformation or a shift in human consciousness. That in a sense, oil, coal, and even nuclear, maybe nuclear is as far as you can go with a culture that's based on separation of matter, domination of nature, and so on. It's just a kind of explosion-based technology. There's actually, I think it was a German thinker, Victor Schauberger, who wrote about how all of our technologies in the West are based just on explosion, combustion, whereas nature always uses a combination of implosion and explosion, or kind of vortices. So he began to develop a whole theory around vortices and so on. But it's a very complex question. There's certainly a lot of interim renewable sources that are available, but I personally have the sense that there could be a whole quantum jump into a different form of energy. And obviously, all around the world right now, we've been seeing UFO sightings that have become more and more visible to more and more people. At the same time, we also have the phenomenon of the crop circles that appear in England that a lot of people dismiss, but I actually looked at very seriously in my book. If those beings, if there are galactic beings who are coming from around the universe to check out what's happening here, they're not firing up coal engines to get here, and they're not using nuclear power either. So they're accessing some other form of energy, which, if it's available to them, it should be at some point available to us as well.
Is this shift in consciousness the key to change also in the other fields, in agriculture and food supply, water supply, in the money system, the financial system we have around the globe, the media system? Can it only change when at the same time our consciousness changes?
Yeah, I mean that would be my conclusion. I mean, I think Albert Einstein even said something along like, you can't solve a problem at the same level of consciousness that created it. You have to make a jump to another level, and then the problem almost becomes dissolved. So we're kind of trapped in the inertia of our social system, our cultural system, even our language, which is an inheritance of this whole evolutionary process, which kind of enforces separation. In the film, we interview a Lakota Indian who talks about it in his language. They don't even have a word for I or me. So this concept of an ego-based identity that has become so predominant in our culture doesn't even exist in the same way for them. So we have, first of all, we have a consciousness problem that is going to require some type of breakthrough, some type of quantum jump. But we have examples of jumps like that happening in the past. There's no reason to think that it couldn't happen again.
What I like in your film the most is that this film is free of any esoteric stuff. It is a very realistic film who gives a very real, quote, picture of what's going on in the world. How do you see the chances that this jump in consciousness can actually happen? I mean, if you look at the United States, if you look at Europe, if you look at global businesses, global politics, is there hope that our so-called leaders have got the message and know what to do, that they have to work on their own ego and their own consciousness? Or how do you see that? Well,
I think there's hope that our so-called leaders could be displaced and supplanted by a different type of social organization. There's ideas around the open source model on the internet where instead of having a hierarchical corporate structure, things develop more through collaboration, enthusiasm and sharing, and the products that are created in this way can often be better than the ones that are created through the old hierarchical corporate structure. And that could potentially shift from just being software, but for being almost everything in society, even how society reproduces itself. So what was your question again?
whether you
Oh, hope. Yeah, for sure, yeah. I mean, I think life is a total miracle. I mean, we were sitting here, I think we have it's 7 trillion cells in our body that, work together to keep us going, and microorganisms that, have all decided symbiotically to connect, to allow us to have this conversation. So I think we have a lot of hope to see a jump to a different level of social organization also, almost as if humanity could become a collective organism and function by sharing resources efficiently and equitably. You don't see in your body, one cell hoarding 10 trillion units of energy while all the other cells are starving, because then you'd have a dead body. So somehow nature has worked out these collaborative and cooperative methods, and in a sense we now need to learn from nature.
One sign of hope, at least here in Germany, might be that the elections in the strongest economic state of our country, Baden-Württemberg, which took place 3 weeks after the Japanese nuclear disaster and the tragic tsunami, for the first time the Green Party is running the country, the most, the strongest economic country of Germany. This is a sign of hope, I think, because it indicates that this completely different way of seeing the world and seeing priorities is reaching the mainstream. But do you think that the reason for that, which is the catastrophe in Japan and the increased number of volcanoes eruptions and of things like Katarina in New Orleans, is there any reason for that? Is this connected with each other or with something bigger or higher, or what's your view on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that everything is interconnected, and I try to maintain kind of a non-dualistic perspective. I think all of these things are connected to the shift in our reality, which is both psychic consciousness shift, but also a physical and material shift. I mean, in fact, the duality between the psychic and the physical is probably something that we're going to transcend as we shift into this next cycle.
Okay.
Yeah.
You have not only done this movie, you have written 2 books, both became bestsellers, also published in Germany, and you are also active in the United States via the internet to do social network, social media work, social communities. Tell us a bit about it. What are you doing with your?
Yeah. Well,
what other activities?
when my second book, 2012, The Return of Quetzalcoatl, came out, it did become very popular for a while in the U.S. And the question that people kept asking me is, because that book was very philosophical, I kind of looked at the problems and the idea, these prophecies of indigenous cultures, but very philosophically. So the question that people kept asking me is, okay, if we understand what you're talking about, that the shift is upon us and something has to change, what do we do? So then I began to think very practically about that. In a sense, the film is an outgrowth of that. The film is definitely a collaboration between myself and João Amorim, the director, who is actually the son of Celso Amorim, who's the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Brazil. So João came with a really brass tacks, kind of like land, water, energy, permaculture focus.
What kind of activity do you do in the States practically, in addition to writing?
Yeah. So I mean, I'm a communicator and a network builder, so and a kind of media person. So that's the main activity that I've been engaged in. I created a company called Evolver. We publish a web magazine, Reality Sandwich, which really presents a lot of these new paradigm ideas and fleshes them out from a whole range of perspectives. Then we started a social network, evolver.net, and as part of Evolver, we have something we call the Evolver Social Movement. We now have about 45 groups that meet up around the world every month. We create themes, but really the themes and the meetings are opportunities to bring people together so that all of these really crucial ideas around this transformation get expressed, people learn how to speak about them, in a sense to construct like a new civil society movement and infrastructure that can be preparing the way for this change, and actually engaging in the process of making the changes, whether it's creating alternative currencies. We've got a couple of Evolver groups in Baltimore and Long Beach have been instrumental in launching new complementary currency projects, or doing permaculture, or creating healing centers and so on. So it's very much about putting these ideas into practice.
Great. Give us one word on the alternative currency system. What is this? How does it work?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of people assume that the form of money that we now have is almost natural. It's like photosynthesis or something. They don't question it. But actually, if we were to step back, we could see that this form of money that we're using is it's a human-made construct. It's been constructed by law, by social codes, by financial institutions, and unfortunately, this form of money that we're using, which is the only real way that we have to exchange value right now in our society, has an ideology invested in it, imprinted on it, that has consequences. because it's issued into circulation as debt, because when people go to get a loan from the bank, they're given the loan, but they have to go and sort of fight and compete against everybody else in society to bring back the interest on that loan. What we have is a kind of currency that instills within it competition rather than cooperation. And in a sense, we could see that when biologists look at the ecosystems, they find that immature ecosystems are characterized by fighting and competition and aggression. Mature ecosystems are characterized by cooperation, symbiosis, and collaboration. So on a species level, we've been in this phase of immature, kind of adolescent development, growth, and now we're maybe moving into a different phase where we have to take more responsibility, become kind of more stewards for the health of the planet. And the form of currency we've had up to this point is not going to do the trick going forward. So then the question is, what do you do? Now, I'm not a pioneer in this type of thinking. I've just studied, read a bunch of the people who are. One of them is Bernard Lietaer, who's featured in our film, and he has a number of proposals, one of them being a negative interest currency. So instead of a currency just being abstract and virtual, like our currency is now, it would be indexed to a bundle of real-world goods that, go degrade in value with time, because most real-world goods, if you have them, like an old computer is worth less than a new computer. If I gave you a bunch of donuts, you would want to give them out because they would go stale, in a few days if you didn't, So if you had a currency that was, connected to real-world goods and therefore depreciated in value rather than gained value, rather than hoarding it, people would be compelled to share it when they had it. So that's one piece of a puzzle. And instead of having one way of exchanging value, what might emerge in the future would be a whole set of instruments for exchanging value, including time-based currencies, gift-based currencies, and so on.
It's a fascinating concept. If you have a look for a moment on the media worldwide, and how the media industry works, and the media industry, whether it's newspapers, magazines, or television, or internet, are the channels or the methods through which we get to know what's going on in the world. What is your view on this mainstream media business, and what are the alternatives, and what is your hope?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, as we've discussed before, the mainstream media at the moment is unfortunately kind of keeping people in a state of coma. Keeping them basically catatonic, in a sense, deadening them by, stimulating their lower impulses and kind of degrading their higher impulses. So you don't see much spirituality or unity consciousness on TV. You see a lot of guns, you see a lot of violence, you see a lot of negativity. So that's a major problem. Now, if we were to step back and think of humanity graduating into a kind of collective organism, you might think that the media is kind of a nascent organ of this new collective body. So the media would sort of function as kind of like the neurons or the perceptual mechanism, of this organism. So ultimately, there's going to have to be a transformation in how our media functions and how what it chooses to value and how we choose to value that. At the moment, we can't really hope for the corporate media to change instantly. So one option is to keep creating alternative media through the internet, which can also become viral, and you can have millions of people engaged in an alternative way of life and thought system.
If I add one comment to the media industry, the objective is not to report the truth or what the journalists really feel inside. The objective is to create content which guarantees the highest print order, the highest quotes on television, and the highest clicks on the internet in order to generate advertising money through ads, which on the other side tell the consumer what he should buy and what he should do, how he should look, and how he should live. That is the fishing cycle. What is your view how we would live here in our society in, let's say, 10 to 15 years from now? Give us a worst case and give us your best case.
Well, I mean, the worst case will just be a kind of a disintegration into authoritarianism, kind of back to kind of despotism, as catastrophes become more frequent, more people are starving. I mean, we already saw this begin to happen with the global food crisis in 2008 and the riots there, around that. And actually, the worst case, is very, very bad indeed. I mean, if you look at James Lovelock, who was the developer of the Gaia hypothesis, he now, looking at all these material scientific indicators, believes that by the end of this century, there'll only be 150 million people left alive on the Earth maximum. So that's a pretty dire scenario. But on the other hand, from my perspective, Lovelock is only a materialist scientist, and he's missing, first of all, the possibility of a consciousness leap or evolution, but second of all, the fact that there's a relationship between that and even the material existence of the planet. The best case scenario, I think, would be a deep fundamental paradigm shift in our global civilization towards recognizing that the development of the spirit, the development of the soul, are really the core important aspects of the human beingness, and that undergoing kind of initiatory processes are necessary for the human being to come into balance with the cosmos, and to become responsible, for all of life. And I think, that would lead to a very, very different type of civilization.
And what are the odds? 50-50 or other odds?
What are the odds?
Between negative and positive outlook.
It really depends on the day, for me. I mean, sometimes I feel pessimistic. Sometimes I mean, ultimately, I think I feel that it's, that, how can I say this? It's going to happen.
You think we win?
Yeah, why not? Today.
Daniel Pinchbeck, thank you very much. Your movie is a fantastic piece of hope. Thank you for coming to Germany.